Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Garrett, Shackelford, and Logan, Meaux, bringing you the 5th episode of the GuideTech Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about the importance of having an online brand presence. Logan, how you doing, man?
Man, I'm doing all right. I'm in a different setting today. I'm working from home, so not too bad.
I feel you, man.
We're not
Yeah,
alcoholics. We're just from Louisiana. You can see the background.
Yeah, this little wet bar you'll have set up. I mean, you live with two other dudes. I mean, it's just to be expected. You got to have something like that going on. But
Yeah.
I always enjoy coming over because I can steal a drink from y'all or something like that when I get to y'all's house. But
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. I know today we're going to be talking about brand presence, and I know off the bat, I would like to hear your input on this, that brand presence is only for big companies or companies that are, servicing nationwide, whatever that might be. And I just want to go ahead and squash that bug and make sure that everyone understands that even if you are an outfitter or charter and you're set to a specific location, that brand presence is important for every company.
Yeah. I mean, I think the common misconception, and I actually learned this from Gary Vaynerchuk early on, with starting Mallard Bay, probably around the time of the pandemic, was that, if you don't focus on building brand the way you want to at the beginning, like, the way your brand represents itself, you'll reach a point in which it no longer is possible to build the brand that you want to build, right? It's something that can kind of, it's almost like company culture, right? It can kind of sneak under the radar, long enough for you to be like, just write it off.
Right.
And then when you look back, you realize, wow, I could have spent the last 3, 4, 5 years building brand, which is how someone like a Cadillac Creek in Toby has been able to blow up, so to speak. And it may look like an overnight success for him, but he had a very clear brand vision from early on, and I'm sure you saw that when you first went to Cadillac Creek to start doing their marketing as Bourbon Media. Is like, wow, this is a brand that people can get behind, right? It actually stands for something. It has a kind of like a coolness factor to it, but
For sure.
it's not just about being cool and doing things just to be cool, right?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. And I think one thing to hit on too is like, even if you're not planning and thinking about like, what is my brand image or like, how am I making sure my brand is present online? You're doing it anyways, whether you like it or not. When you start a company and you have clients, you are building brand. So you might as well make sure you're paying attention to it. Cause like you said, you could get down the road 3, 4, 5 years and be at an inflection point where like, okay, I need to start building brand so that I can start scaling. Well, you've already built a brand in a way that people recognize your company. And it might not be on the scale that we're talking about with Toby, but it might not be how you wanted your brand to be represented or crafted. So you have to be careful to kind of keep that all in line and in check and make sure you're shaping it in the right way moving forward right from the jump. And I'd like to hear on your point of view, how the brand at Mallard Bay, one, how it took off and what your vision was when you first started it, and then how it started to evolve. Because as we all know, brand doesn't have to stay the same all over time. So if you do get 3 to 5 years down the road, you're not screwed. There's a way to change it. There's ways to fix this and improve it. But yeah, I'd like to hear your take on that and how it's, directly with Mallard Bay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a constant evolution, right? It's,
Right.
just because you have a vision of it, when you start early on, doesn't always mean that vision's going to come true without, really consistent action, right? And I think the consistent action that, we took at the beginning of Mallard Bay versus, what we're doing now for brand was, we always knew not to write it off, or at least I always knew that the worst thing you could do is not invest in some of the brand building activities that can seem like a waste of money at, early on, but that type of brand building or brand building in general is something that compounds. It's not like a it's not an overnight success thing, right?
Yeah.
It's, you know, and you don't have to be the Toby Brolin or the Cadillac Creek, right? It's not about that. Like if you're going to be like, compare yourself to them
Mm-hmm.
and be like, oh, well, it's going to be so hard to get to that point. Well, that happened naturally for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what happened naturally for us was that when I realized that because the name doesn't explain exactly what Mallard Bay does, I knew that Mallard Bay was going to need to stand on its own. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, the name meant something to me at the very beginning, but it was really a means to an end. It was like, we need to come up with a name for the company. We had
Right.
this property that was adjacent to Mallard Bay, a physical body of water in Louisiana,
Mm-hmm.
and Mallard standing for hunting and Bay standing for fishing. And we're like, okay, this is going to be the marketplace, right? And then what we realized kind of later on through the Bourbon Media acquisition is that Mallard Bay as a brand wasn't necessarily speaking to outfitters or the product that we started offering post just the marketplace, right? So we started
Mm-hmm.
offering the GuideTech product, and you actually helped come up with the name GuideTech, and it was
Yeah.
kind of the name of combining all of the services and products that we offer together into one. But that was for me what started Mallard Bay. But I always knew that you're going to invest in like things like a logo and brand guidelines and things like that at for our type of company, not necessarily for an outfitter. But that's because we're a different type of company. A scalable tech startup is not your lifestyle outfitting business, right? Or it's not
Right.
the legacy outfitter that you want to become.
Right.
So that was kind of like how it started. And then why don't you talk about what Jason is coming in and what you learned about branding from just talking with Jason Micheletti
Yeah.
and his experience at Yeti, and how we're going to take our brand to the next level.
Right. Yeah. And so, like Logan has mentioned, Jason Michelotti is coming in and working with us on our brand. And one thing I want to communicate is I'm not the branding expert. I'm the VP of marketing, and marketing is just a way of communicating our brand to other people. It's that touch point for them. Um, but there's so many different aspects within our company that we brand ourselves with, and you as well as an outfitter or fishing charter. Your brand is your why. It is you. It is your core, and that's why you can't represent, or you can't try to duplicate what Toby
Yeah,
has
you can't
built. You
fake it.
do right. You can't fake it. You have to be yourself. And so before a company starts, there's a reason why you're starting it, and then you bring on new people on the team, new services, and there's different reasons to why you do that, and they're going to resonate with your core audience, your target, the people, your ICP, the people that want to come and hunt or fish with you. And that's what Toby's done a really good job at. He's created a way to connect with people. It's down to earth. But with Jason, what we're working on is basically figuring out what that why is. And so Jason's background, I'd love for us to do a podcast with Jason in the future so we could communicate this
Yeah,
even more clearly. But Jason's worked with Yeti, Sitka Gear, Gerber Knives, Meat Eater,
first light.
First Light, the gear, the list goes on. He's worked with a lot of companies that everyone knows and loves, and found a way to make sure that those brands resonate and connect with those people. And so once you build that true brand that people can resonate with, that why, the resonating why that you have, you're going to have clients that you build client or brand loyalty as you do this. And so that's one of the most important keys to building out brand awareness. It's not just so you can get that first customer, it's so that you can bring a customer in and keep them for a lifetime and increase that lifetime value. Um, so we're just now kicking this off with Jason, and we've got some projects that we've been working on internally, like our GuideTech Presents as an example, just so we can connect and share that deeper meaning of why. When we're looking at why we do things, we're still at the surface level of why we do that, but it's high. Looking down on it, we haven't narrowed it in, but we're here to serve outfitters and charters and sportsmen, and we're here to build communities, connecting them with y'all. Um, and so I would challenge outfitters and charters to sit back and say, why did I start this? It's not just so I can pad my pockets. We know that being an outfitter or charter is difficult. It's difficult to get to the point where, you're financially successful enough to where it's a full-time job, that's a stepping stone. Then getting to the next point where you can hire people. So it's a challenge, but there's a reason why you started it. There's people that are coming into your community, your circle as clients, and they're wanting to stay. And so what is that thing that resonates between them? And that is what your brand is.
Yeah, there's a reason why they choose you that you may not understand, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're figuring out as a company right now is we have a lot of brand advocates out there, but
Yeah.
we don't know exactly why or haven't heard exactly from them like why they're supporting Mallard Bay as a brand. Is it because we're genuine, we're building community? These things are only we're just scratching the surface of figuring it out, right?
Mhm.
And so, if that's any kind of consolation of like if you're worried that you haven't done this yet, it's never too late, right? It's just a consistent thing that you have to be cognizant of. It's almost like a perspective thing. It's, you can represent the brand. At first, you are the brand, right?
Mhm.
You as the starting founder of the outfitter in your guides, you represent the brand. So anything you say or do, reflects on you
Exactly.
and the brand itself. So that's all going to lead to customer loyalty or, in a worst case scenario, customer churn if they're not getting a good experience or not having a good experience with the brand, right? And that's something that's not easy to figure out, right? It's not a, just a one and done type of thing. It takes experimentation. It takes, investing, trying new things. Just talk. It's not just about having good hunting or the best lodge, right? It goes
Right.
much deeper than that, right? And that's what I learned. That's what we're learning from Jason is, how deep did they need to go at Yeti to discover these things? Like he talks about, okay, well, Yeti started out as a bear proof cooler, but it didn't,
Mhm.
it wasn't always a bear proof cooler. At first, it was a cooler that you could stand on in the back of your truck and not fall through, right? That's why the founder invented it. It wasn't until you
Right.
do these things later on to discover the why as to, okay, we appeal to people that need bear proof coolers. Okay, that's step one. All right, well, what's the next level of that? Well, Yeti to them was that, they couldn't get over, there was only, I think, like three names they had thrown out there, but Yeti was the one they remembered when they were going through
Mhm.
the branding process, and Yeti stuck, right? And then now you couldn't imagine it called something else, right? But
Right.
that takes time, to where they are now to where they were. That's a lot of time, energy, and effort and focus on brand, right? And then you can
Yes.
see with Yeti how they've, gotten away from that in some way, shape, or form through, through going through the process of being private equity backed and being acquired and then being a public company. These things, they all work against you later on, right? That's why you have to try to establish it as early on as possible, is because there's more forces working against you later on, right?
100%. I mean, it's obvious, but man, Yeti is such a great example because everyone can relate to that. And it's kind of interesting when you think about the word cooler or, hey, can you bring the Yeti out? Like if you're going camping, make sure to grab the Yeti. You're no longer saying like grab that cooler, grab this. But they did that. So they built this brand, but now they've got it to where the masses are saying, hey, don't forget the Yeti instead of don't forget the cooler. They're using it. They've coined that as the new cooler. It's just Yeti.
Hmm.
Um, but they've done that through getting on digital platforms and connecting with their clients. And I think one thing that we need to like dive into here for outfitters and charters is okay, we come up with this brand, we are a brand. Now, how do we even communicate that? How do we start getting that across the line for people so that they can start getting to that point where people are, when they think of an outfitter, they're thinking of their outfitter. So, yeah, I would love to hear some inputs on like the digital presence now that they've figured out, okay, I need to have a brand now, digital presence. How does that tie into it?
Yeah. So, I mean, your digital presence is essentially what customers are going to look for to validate what you're providing. they're going to go and search on Facebook for your name. They're going to look you up. They're going to look for, and this is like part of our vetting process, right? We do a search on Facebook, and we'll see if clients have been talking about you positively or negatively in Facebook groups, right? Because it's a referral based business through and through, and that's extremely important in the outfitting industry. And if you're lacking on that, it shows up in your digital presence, right? It shows up on the quality of your website. It shows up on how fast you get back to a client that's interested in booking. These are the things that all reflect on your brand that you may not be cognizant of.
Right.
That's an important thing to mention, is that they all come together to represent you, right?
Yeah.
And if you are a genuinely good person and you are conducting good business, that is what you want reflecting on your brand, right? And on you as a
Right.
person, because remember, they're tied together,
Yep.
especially early on. And even later on, like, you telling your story, as we kind of talked about in previous podcasts, is like that can do just as good of a marketing effort as anything else. You talking about your outfitter in a genuine why you got started, asking customers, hey, I've never really asked, why do you choose me versus, another outfitter, right? What makes you come here instead of somewhere else? And they tell you those things, and those are the things you need to lean into,
Yeah.
And not focus on some of the other things, which may just be profit driven, or, acquiring more land to take more customers, right? You over time can build a brand which allows you to charge more, right? I mean,
Yep.
that's what we've talked about several times on this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100% agree. And I think one of the really important things that you talked about, that I don't know that outfitters do this, but asking those clients and then getting the feedback on why they're choosing you and then doubling down on that. And you brought up that customer service aspect. And I want to talk about that for a little bit, because when it comes to that brand, the response time, that speed to lead, or that the speed to answering a phone call, calling a client back, texting them back, emailing them back, all that stuff is super important, because like Logan said, that tells them everything they need to know about you. And that is a part of building your brand loyalty. If you're slow to take care of clients, if they have questions, that I know so many clients, I've heard so many stories where, oh, we got this one client that's always asking us questions. They're calling and seeing how the hunting's been a month before their trip's coming up. And it's just week after week after week. But it is so important to be that guy that answers the phone call, because if you go back to your why, that will tell you what the right thing to do is. If there's someone, if you started this for a specific reason and it's to serve people, get people outdoors, and it's the right why, then you're going to make sure you pick up that phone. You're going to make sure you're responding to those emails, and you have to live by your why. Because if you're not, it's not your true why. If you're not willing to do that stuff, and it is going to show on Facebook, on your reviews and client return rates. So it's extremely important to understand that brand goes outside of what people see online on what you're posting, or what your ads look like, or whatever hoodie design you did for your outfitter. It all matters, and some of this stuff matters way more than you might understand. But customer success, when they're having a hard time, if they have an issue with their hunt, if the hunt wasn't that great, but hey, what was my why? Okay, this is how I should treat this client because this is why I do this. It's going to create a lot more success for you, and a lot more repeat books, and a lot more brand loyalty.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about the why of any that drives any one outfitter, I think it goes into everything that you do. It's why you get up at a certain time to make sure that everyone's in the blind 15 minutes before shooting time. It's the why you scout a certain particular way. All of these things are driven based off how you treat your customers, right? And how those customers feel after the trip. They feel like they've had a successful trip. Wyatt, who's our VP of customer and industry success, and this industry is so tight knit that we realized it was important to have somebody that's focused on building relationships with the brands in the industry, not just our customers. But the difference between customer service and customer success is really simple. Customer success is proactive. Customer service is reactive. If you've if you're dealing with an issue, it's already past the customer success portion of the business, right? It's now
Mm,
customer service. You're trying to create customer delight after something has gone wrong or something wasn't up to their expectations. But if you do a good job at the beginning of managing expectations, and that is the customer success portion of it that not a lot of people get right, right? And
right.
just now understanding the difference, it brings me back to like when I worked at Waiter, which was my dad's company, and I worked in customer success, and we were called customer success representatives, but we didn't understand the difference. We just had
Right.
a way of doing things that was very standardized and was like, no, you have to call restaurants that don't accept orders within 10 minutes. That way, because you can imagine if you're a customer that orders and the restaurant hasn't accepted the order in 10 minutes, much less 20 minutes, that delivery driver is then going to get there an hour and a half later than you were expecting, right?
Mm,
Because it compounds. And that's where that proactiveness comes from, at least in our customer success process, is because we experienced it at the beginning. But Garrett, I wanted to ask you a question back to when you were in the Bourbon Media days and getting your first customers.
yeah.
What did you want those customers to know? Why choose you, right? Why was someone at the beginning choosing Bourbon Media over someone else, right? Over a split read or someone like that, right? Like
Right.
what was that driving, and what did you see as important at the beginning?
And at the beginning, and I think this goes across the board for a lot of our industry, but I would tie it down to a couple of things. And I'll be honest, I didn't truly think about it that much when I was in that seat at the time, but now looking back on it, I'd say it's a personal relationship there they were getting. I wanted them to know that they were going to get a personal relationship and that it was someone who was willing to go above and beyond what they needed, and that I was truly there to make sure that they succeeded first, and that I knew. And when me and Nick came up with the subscription model, we knew like we were not going to make a living off of that, like that this would be a grind. And so we were picking up other jobs to keep us going. But I knew, hey, outfitters is who we want to serve. We can offer something super cheap that's the best in the industry in one specific niche and do it to the best we possibly can. If they're going to call, if they need something, they can call us and we're going to answer. The people who are working on the projects that they're paying for, that's what I was selling, was a personal relationship for someone who is going to help them with brand awareness on their website, hopefully helping them save time and money along the way so that this industry could grow, so that being a guide or a fishing charter could be more affordable. And so that's why we did it. And it resonated with people a lot. And I want to go into another topic of like, once you have your brand and your why, it makes it a lot easier to make decisions. Like I was saying earlier on the customer success, it also makes a decision with who you're going to work with. And it does benefit you if the values align. And so Toby was one of those clients that was like a no brainer. We need to get with this guy. We need to do whatever we can to earn his business. And it paid off tenfold. And working with Toby, I really got to know him when I first went out. I could see that his values were aligned with the values that we had at Bourbon Media. And he had already built a brand. At the time, I didn't know that he was really just getting started. But now that I've really got to know him, he was just getting started, but he was already dominating with his brand. And going and being able to tell people that I work with someone like Toby Brolin, man, that just builds so much trust and so much like, they're like, okay, this brand is more legit. Bourbon Media is legit because they're working with someone like Toby Brolin. And I've seen outfitters do that as well. I've seen them do the inverse where they'll just go and get whatever free gear they can get, and I can understand and respect that. But I've also seen other outfitters go and work with specific companies. So I'll give an example. Whiskey Sloughs. They work with Gander. Mark owns Gander Valley Calls. And Mark has gotten Whiskey Sloughs several clients because he has built up a brand and a reputation to where now he can direct people. I can't take you on a hunt, but I can get you on people that run my calls. I trust them. They're great guys, and then get you on a good hunt. And so it also goes out, like you were saying, into the rest of the industry. So you have a brand internally, but then you start adding on those pieces of different people that you know and trust and that align with you. And now all of a sudden you're tapping into their network as well. And I've seen us do that, and Wyatt specifically do that a tremendous job on that. He's a freaking rock star. He's another person we need to have on this podcast. And I'd love to see him come on and do a podcast specifically about being proactive in your customer success and helping outfitters with that specifically.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's one thing that Wyatt does, arguably better than anybody in the company, and that is why he's in the position he is in, is that he's very upfront and honest about why he's there or why he's trying to meet you. He's just a genuine person. And, he was at Stanfield Outfitters this weekend on the Big Honker podcast, and they invited him to go on that podcast after, meeting and having a conversation with him for 15 minutes at NWTF. And they talked for 3 hours on this podcast,
awesome.
right? And, that opens up the door and the opportunity for us to even sponsor the podcast, and for us to work with Stanfield Outfitters and sell some of their dove hunts and earn their business, right? Because we're not out here, we're not entitled to shit. We're out here trying to earn your business. And the way we try to earn your business is by letting you know that we are going to be your business partner and not just, a parasite to your business like some marketing agencies that don't get the industry can be, right? If you work with your local marketing agency that has said they're going to run, do SEO for you and paid ads and everything, they don't know the industry. They don't get what we're talking about here. They just see it as a means to an end for growing their sales, right?
Yep.
And that distinction is so important to figure out. And the sooner you can figure out, why someone chooses you because you're genuine, just like Toby is, right? Or because you do things a certain way that resonate with the customer, when it comes to scouting, calling birds, setting up, moving things around, making adjustments. Those are the things that those customers are looking for that you aren't always aware of, right? You don't know that until someone like us is saying like, hey, these are the important things, right? But there are some things that you do know are important and you've experienced it. But if you don't spend any time thinking about it, and that's what we're really talking about here, start thinking at the very minimum about your brand and how it's perceived to other people and what your social media and online presence looks like. Because just thinking about it and changing and experimenting with a few things can make all the difference in the world. And you can get that ROI, right, that you're looking for. But yeah, it may not come, nothing is going to come with zero work. I think that's where at the beginning, Mallard Bay diverged from what we were trying to do at the beginning, which is like, we'll set up your outfitter, list you on the marketplace, and then you'll just get bookings. Well, that didn't require any work on your part, right? Now it's completely flipped, is that we're going to work together to build your brand and to build you from, what we call an emerging outfitter, at the very beginning to, a market shaper, going through the part where you're an established player and you're starting to grow. And then you want to start thinking about what the legacy looks like for your brand. And so we had to figure all these things out, and it just takes a lot of time, attention, and effort. But, nothing, you can't get ROI for free, right? I think that's kind of what it's called, return on investment, for a reason. It requires you to invest something in order to get something out of it, right?
100%. Yep. I couldn't agree more, man. And I think that is a great place to wrap this podcast up. So if you're listening, go ahead, subscribe or like the podcast. And if you enjoyed it, please leave a review and share it with anyone else that might enjoy this podcast. But other than that, stick around for the 6th podcast that should be coming up in the following week after this one. So we appreciate y'all sticking around and listening to the podcast, and we'll talk to y'all later.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.